Good morning.
Good morning.
And happy Father's Day. Do we have any fathers here today? We do. Anybody who has a father or had a father? It's good that you laugh, Mike, because I say this every year.
I know.
Maybe that's why you're laughing. You're laughing at me, not near me.
No, I'm not laughing.
Okay, good. Well, it's a good thing to be a dad. One of my favorite things, and it is the thing probably among everything else that has taught me the most about life is parenting children. You learn a lot of lessons, sometimes the hard way, but you learn a lot of good things too. So excited about that. Next Sunday after church here, over at the other church, St. Mark's, they're having a church picnic, a good old-fashioned church picnic. They're having it at a park a few blocks from the church called Vretner Park. And it is one of the Cudahy city parks. It's right near St. Francis High School. Anyway, it will contain a worship service at 10:15. So if you want to just go there and worship, it is something called the Chicago Folk Service, which was from the 70s. And I know we've done it here, but not in a long time. But they bring it out every couple of years for their summer worship. So that's what they're doing. And then at around 11-ish, then there will be food and drinks and games for the kids and bingo and all kinds of fun stuff. So come and enjoy a good old-fashioned church picnic next week if you want to be part of that. If you need a ride, you want a carpool, let me know. We'll try to arrange something.
They have nice people. I went to one.
Yeah, they do.
Just like us, nice.
Yeah.
The meat will be served, but if you want to bring a dish.
Oh, yeah. So they're taking care of all the meat, but like on the grill. But if you want to bring a dish to pass, you can. There's no free will offer or anything. Just if you don't cook very well, bring a bag of chips or something. You know, could be your go-to. All right. Anything else? Well, let us begin with our worship. Please rise.
Reading is from the 20th chapter of Exodus, beginning at the 3rd verse. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of their parents, to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of my name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, or your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Here ends the reading.
Thank you. So this is part of the 10 Commandments. Do you think we could, as a group, name the 10 Commandments? You don't have to do it in order. What's one of the commandments? Okay. your father and mother.
Thou shalt not kill.
Good one for Father's Day. Too bad it's next week's lesson. What, Mike?
Thou shalt not kill.
You shall not kill. What else?
Do not steal.
Remember the Sabbath day. You all have done that.
No, do not bear false witness.
Do not bear false witness.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Yes, no other gods. What else?
Steal.
You shall steal, or you shall not steal. Okay? Thou shalt not steal.
Adultery.
Thou shalt not commit adultery. The last one is
Covet.
covet. Your neighbor's wife, or your neighbor's house, or any of the stuff that your neighbor has that you don't have. That's probably the hardest one. That's the biggest one. People have a problem with maybe. Well, in this scripture, the first time I read it on Tuesday night, I realized that it says, "For I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, and I punish the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me." I'm like, well, that's kind of severe, isn't it? And I thought, do I just skip over that, not bring it up, hope nobody notices it? Or do I, wrestle with it for a little bit? At the time that this was written, people lived in large households, many generations. So it would be easy to see that a bad decision that somebody made is reflected in bad decisions that their kids make and their grandkids make. You would see that pretty easily. And another thing they were dealing with at the time was that people thought that God was jealous and punishing. I think a better word than jealous, because to me jealousy says insecurity, and I can't imagine God as insecure. I would say, I, the Lord your God, am a passionate God. I love you. How's that? Sounds better? And I extend blessing to the 1,000th generation of those who love me. So if people already believe that God punishes people and that God is angry and jealous and fickle, which is what people believed about all of the gods at the time, because most of them were just made up, and they believed that the gods were here to exploit you and to punish you if you stepped out of line. This is actually very progressive to say, well, that might happen for 3 generations, but to 1,000th generation, God is faithful and steadfast and loving. And by comparison, 3 generations or 1,000, if you already believe that God punishes, maybe this would help you to believe how much God loves. I read an interesting article in Scientific American. I don't really read the Scientific American religiously, but the title of the article was, "Does Trauma Affect the Next Generation?" And I thought, well, this might say something to what I'm speaking about here. And it was a researcher who was around in New York City right after 9/11. And she and her colleagues were given a grant to study all of the women who were downtown in proximity and to the trauma that happened who were pregnant. And they got 273 women, or 278, something like that, women who were pregnant, to come and get care so they could study them. And what they found was that the birth weight of their babies was pretty low in comparison. And then they studied some of those. They were able to get some of those kids to come back years later to do more testing to see if, other than birth weight, was there anything else going on. And what they found was low level of a hormone that helps people deal with stress called cortisol. And so that, I guess you might be able to understand that a woman who is pregnant at the time of a trauma would pass trauma on to her child. That seems to make sense. But what they also found was that these same women, when they gave birth 8, 9, 10 years later, had low birth weight children and had lower levels of cortisol. It was stored in their eggs somehow, this response to trauma. You can see how it would be easy to trace this over many generations. If they're all living in the same household, you might notice that a natural phenomenon is that parents pass on the trauma of their lives, i.e. their bad decisions, to their offspring. And then they did something that's really fascinating, because they wanted to see if it was just men or women, or if men also who had been traumatized could pass this on to their kids. And so they did this experiment with rats or mice, and they would have a mouse find its way through a maze by smelling a cherry blossom, a very pleasant smell. The mouse would get all the way to the cherry blossom, and when it got there, they would shock the mouse. It's not a very kind experiment. But they did this over and over and over again with hundreds of mice. And then what they realized is when these mice gave birth, right, and they would have only contributed, to the women, to the female mice who actually gives birth, the babies of these mice, when they would smell cherry blossom, would panic. And they would not go toward it, they would run away from it. And their babies had a slightly less rate of that response, but some of them still did. So this understanding of God punishing people generation after generation for the trauma or the bad decisions of their parents, this is science, it's not really God. And so much of what people believed about God when the Bible was written, they didn't know the science behind it, and everything was sort of attributed to God. So the good stuff that happened to God, the bad stuff that happened to God, had nothing to do with your decisions. I mean, is that interesting? Isn't that fascinating? But the point, I think, I don't want to just dwell on the bad decisions that people make or the trauma they've experienced. The article goes on to talk about people who were in Vietnam who had PTSD and how they were able to pass their low levels of cortisol. That's one of the things that happens when people have been through a trauma to their children. But they also learned this, that if you are a man or a woman with PTSD and you find a loving relationship, you find a home, you find people that will nurture you and love you, those effects are lessened in your children and your children's children. So it's not a death sentence to say that because you were involved in trauma that for the next 3 generations your kids are going to have low cortisol. I wish I could go into the science of what low cortisol does, but it's not a very good thing. But what happens if you can find a place of love and nurture and rebuild that, your cortisol level can come back. This is exactly, can you imagine the writer of this hitting it so firmly on the head? To love God and to love our families and to follow these commandments, create a loving environment for us and for our children and our children's children, so on and so on. And to be involved in an unloving household, all of the trauma that comes with abuse is cyclical. And then the kids of abuse are even less able to handle the abuse. And yet, someone needs to break the cycle. We do that by loving, by accepting. We also do that by not painting God as an angry, jealous, insecure God who's going to get you if you don't do what you're told. We do that by painting God as a loving, patient God who walks with us, who moves in and through us and helps us to deal with the traumas in our lives, the everyday things, but also helps us to do that for others. That's the good news today. Even the traumas, and we all have traumas in our life, they don't have to be what carries forward. What can carry forward is the love we have for our children,